They said a woman's place was in the kitchen, that her hands were made for kneading bread and her mind for planning meals. But when Elena Rossetti stood in the heart of her family's sprawling estate kitchen at midnight, systematically sharpening every blade in her collection until they could split hairs, she was preparing for a war that none of them saw coming. This is the story of how a young woman forced into domestic servitude transformed her prison into the most dangerous room in 1920s Sicily, and how her rebellion would ultimately save dozens of lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Rossetti estate sprawled across 300 acres of Sicilian countryside, its olive groves and vineyards generating the wealth that had kept the family powerful for generations. But beneath the pastoral beauty lay a network of violence and intimidation that extended from the docks of Palermo to the mountain villages where rival families contested territory with bullets rather than lawyers. Elena's father, Don Marco Rossetti, ruled this empire with traditional methods that left no room for modern ideas about women's roles or independence. Elena had been confined to the domestic quarters since her 16th birthday, 3 years earlier, when her father declared that her education was complete and her true purpose could begin. No more books, no more rides through the countryside, no more conversations about politics or business with the men who visited their home. From that day forward, her world consisted of the kitchen, the pantry, the herb garden, and the small bedroom where she slept under the watchful eye of her duenna, Signora Benedetti. The kitchen itself was a marvel of efficiency and tradition, occupying the entire ground floor of the estate's east wing. Massive stone hearths dominated 2 walls, their iron fixtures blackened by generations of cooking fires. Wooden tables, worn smooth by decades of use, stretched across the center of the room, while copper pots and iron pans hung from ceiling beams like medieval weapons waiting for battle. Every surface held evidence of serious culinary work: knife blocks filled with blades of various sizes, mortar and pestle sets carved from local stone, and shelves lined with glass jars containing herbs, spices, and preserves. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What visitors didn't realize was that Elena had been systematically studying every tool, every technique, and every possibility for transformation that the kitchen offered. Where others saw domestic servitude, she saw an arsenal in disguise. Where they expected submission, she was planning revolution. The awakening had begun 6 months earlier, during a particularly violent dispute between her father's organization and the Torino family from the neighboring district. Elena had been preparing dinner when she heard gunshots from the main courtyard, followed by screaming and the sound of automobiles speeding away. When she looked out the kitchen window, she saw 2 of her father's men bleeding on the cobblestones while others dragged them toward the house. That night, as Don Marco's associates debated revenge strategies in the dining room above, Elena realized that her enforced domesticity had made her invisible to the very people who controlled her life. They discussed murders, kidnappings, and territory wars within her hearing because they literally didn't consider her presence relevant to their plans. She was furniture to them, useful furniture that prepared their food and maintained their comfort, but furniture nonetheless. But furniture could observe, could listen, and could plan. More importantly, furniture had access to tools and knowledge that warriors might overlook until it was too late. Elena's transformation began with the knives. The kitchen contained dozens of blades designed for different culinary purposes: long, flexible filleting knives for fish, heavy cleavers for bones and joints, small paring knives for delicate work, and chef's knives balanced for hours of continuous use. She began studying each one, not just as a cooking implement, but as a potential weapon, learning to throw them with accuracy, conceal them within her clothing, and sharpen them to surgical precision. The pestle and mortar became her introduction to chemistry and toxicology. Many of the herbs and roots in her garden were poisonous in sufficient quantities, while others could induce sleep, nausea, or temporary paralysis when properly prepared. Elena began experimenting with combinations and concentrations, testing small doses on the estate's rats and stray cats to understand their effects and timing. Fire was perhaps the most obvious weapon in any kitchen, but Elena approached it with scientific precision rather than obvious aggression. She learned to control temperature and timing with absolute accuracy, understanding how different materials burned, how smoke could be directed for maximum effect, and how seemingly innocent cooking fires could be transformed into instruments of destruction within seconds. But beyond weapons and tactics, Elena was developing something more dangerous: intelligence networks and strategic thinking. Her position in the kitchen made her the center of all household information. Servants reported to her about activities throughout the estate, delivery men shared gossip from town, and visiting associates often spoke freely around the harmless girl who brought them food and wine. Elena's formal education had ended abruptly when her father decided that books and tutors were unnecessary distractions for a young woman whose future lay in marriage and motherhood. But her real education was just beginning, as she discovered that the kitchen contained libraries of knowledge that no university could match if one knew how to read the lessons hidden within everyday domestic tasks. The morning routine that Signora Benedetti insisted upon became Elena's first classroom in disguise. Each day began before dawn, with inventory of the pantry stores, checking for spoilage, infestation, or theft. This seemingly mundane task taught Elena to notice minute changes in her environment, to identify problems before they became critical, and to maintain detailed mental catalogs of resources and supplies. Skills that would prove invaluable when planning required precision timing and perfect knowledge of available materials. Cooking itself provided endless opportunities for learning chemistry, biology, and physics through practical application. Elena discovered that bread making taught her about fermentation and bacterial cultivation, knowledge that could be applied to other organic processes with more sinister purposes. Preserving meats and vegetables introduced her to salt concentrations, pH levels, and the environmental conditions that encouraged or prevented decay. Candy making required understanding of temperature control and chemical reactions that could easily be adapted for creating more dangerous substances. But the most valuable lessons came from her grandmother's old recipe books, written in a mixture of Italian dialects and coded language that reflected generations of women passing down secrets that extended far beyond cuisine. Between instructions for pasta sauces and holiday desserts, Elena found formulas for treating various ailments using kitchen ingredients, methods for preserving food during sieges or famines, and cryptic references to special preparations for difficult guests. One particularly intriguing entry, written in her great-grandmother's spidery handwriting, described a method for preparing sleeping soup that would quiet troublesome visitors without permanent harm. The recipe called for specific mushrooms that grew in the estate's oak groves, combined with herbs from her garden, and prepared according to precise timing that matched the phases of the moon. Elena realized that her female ancestors had been encoding survival knowledge within domestic traditions for generations. The revelation transformed her understanding of her position within the household. Rather than being the first woman in her family to be confined to domestic duties, she was actually inheriting a tradition of resistance that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. The kitchen wasn't just a prison, it was a fortress that previous generations of women had prepared for exactly this kind of siege. Her exploration of the estate's storage areas revealed additional evidence of this hidden legacy. In the wine cellar, behind racks of aging bottles, Elena discovered wooden crates containing glass vials, measuring spoons, and small notebooks written in the same coded language as her grandmother's recipes. Some vials still contained dried substances that released familiar odors when opened, herbs she recognized from the garden mixed with others that didn't match anything in her current growing areas. The herb garden itself became a more complex puzzle once Elena understood what to look for. Plants that she had always assumed were purely culinary, like the foxglove growing near the kitchen entrance, or the nightshade family vegetables thriving in the sunny corner, revealed themselves as dual-purpose crops that could nourish or harm, depending on preparation and dosage. Her ancestors had been cultivating a pharmacy disguised as a vegetable garden. But perhaps the most important discovery came when Elena found her great-aunt's journal hidden behind loose stones in the pantry wall. Zia Francesca had been the previous generation's keeper of household knowledge, and her writings revealed a sophisticated understanding of the political and criminal dynamics that surrounded their family's operations. She had documented the habits, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities of various associates and rivals, creating detailed intelligence profiles that would have impressed professional spies. More crucially, Francesca's journal contained strategic advice that had been passed down through generations of women who had learned to navigate dangerous family situations. Men believe that power comes from strength and fear, One entry read, "But they forget that those who control food and shelter hold life and death in their hands. A woman who understands this truth becomes more dangerous than any soldier." The journal also revealed that Elena's confinement to the kitchen wasn't entirely her father's original idea. Signora Benedetti, her supposed guardian and instructor, had been subtly encouraging this arrangement while secretly preparing Elena for responsibilities that extended far beyond cooking and cleaning. The older woman had been teaching survival skills disguised as domestic training, waiting for Elena to demonstrate the intelligence and determination necessary for more advanced lessons. This revelation led to a crucial conversation between Elena and her duenna, conducted in whispers during the evening meal preparation when the rest of the household was occupied with business meetings. Signora Benedetti confirmed that she had been part of the hidden network of women who had protected their families for generations, using domestic positions to gather intelligence, eliminate threats, and maintain stability when the men's violent methods proved insufficient or counterproductive. "Your father believes he has contained you," Benedetti explained while showing Elena the proper technique for deboning chickens with surgical precision. "But containment works both ways. You are protected here, with access to everything you need to develop your capabilities. When the time comes, and it will come, you will be ready to act in ways that no one expects." The training intensified after this conversation, though always disguised as normal household instruction. Elena learned to identify poisonous plants by smell and texture, to prepare medications and antidotes using common kitchen ingredients, and to preserve evidence of various illegal activities by encoding information within seemingly innocent household records. The first test of Elena's developing skills came unexpectedly on a humid Tuesday evening in late spring, when her cousin Roberto arrived at the estate with news that would shatter the careful routine of domestic life. Roberto, who served as one of Don Marco's primary lieutenants, brought word that the Torino family had kidnapped Elena's younger brother Alessandro during his journey home from university in Rome. The kidnapping represented more than just criminal opportunism. It was a direct challenge to Don Marco's authority, and a test of his willingness to escalate the ongoing territorial dispute into open warfare. Alessandro had been taken while traveling under what should have been neutral protection, violating agreements that had kept family members safe from direct retaliation for decades. Elena learned of these developments not through official family announcements, but by positioning herself strategically in the kitchen while meals were served in the adjacent dining room. Her father's associates spoke freely during dinner, assuming that household staff were either too ignorant or too intimidated to understand the implications of their conversations. This assumption would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. The discussion revealed that Don Marco was planning immediate and violent retaliation against the Torino stronghold, but that he lacked sufficient intelligence about their current defensive preparations. Previous attempts to infiltrate their organization had failed, leaving the Rossetti family essentially blind regarding enemy capabilities and intentions. Roberto argued for a direct assault, while other associates counseled patience and negotiation. But Elena recognized an opportunity that the men had overlooked entirely. 3 days earlier, she had received a request from Signora Torino herself, asking if the Rossetti kitchen could provide catering services for a large family celebration planned for the following weekend. The request had seemed innocent enough. Families in their social circle frequently shared resources for major events, regardless of business disagreements between their menfolk. Elena had initially planned to decline the request politely, understanding that her father would disapprove of any contact with rival families. But now, with Alessandro's life hanging in the balance and her father's organization lacking crucial intelligence, the catering opportunity represented a perfect infiltration method that no male strategist would consider. She approached Signora Benedetti with her plan during the late evening cleanup, when the estate had settled into its nightly routine. The older woman listened carefully as Elena outlined her strategy, occasionally nodding approval or suggesting modifications that would improve the operation's chances of success. "The Torino celebration will require significant preparation," Elena explained while cleaning knives with unusual attention to their sharpened edges. "Multiple courses, specialty dishes, servers to assist with presentation. It would be natural for me to personally oversee the kitchen operations, ensuring that our family's reputation for hospitality remains intact despite current business disagreements."
Benedetti understood immediately that Elena was proposing much more than simple catering. Access to the Torino kitchen would provide opportunities for intelligence gathering, sabotage, and potentially direct action against Alessandro's captors. More importantly, it would allow Elena to demonstrate her capabilities in a real operational environment, testing whether her domestic training could translate into effective field work. The next morning, Elena composed a carefully worded response to Signora Torino's request, accepting the catering commission while suggesting that she personally supervise the food preparation to ensure appropriate quality and presentation. Her letter emphasized the traditional importance of maintaining social courtesies even during periods of business tension, presenting her involvement as evidence of both families' commitment to civilized behavior. The response arrived within hours, expressing gratitude for Elena's professional services and providing detailed information about menu preferences, guest count, and timing requirements. More significantly for Elena's purposes, the letter included floor plans of the Torino estate's entertainment areas and specific instructions for accessing their kitchen facilities during the preparation period. Elena spent the following days developing her operational plan while maintaining the appearance of routine domestic activity. Her menu selections were chosen not just for their culinary appeal, but for their potential to serve multiple purposes during the mission. Dishes that required extensive preparation time would justify extended presence in the enemy kitchen. Recipes calling for numerous ingredients would provide opportunities to introduce additional substances if direct action became necessary. The herb and spice selections were particularly strategic. Several items in Elena's planned menu required seasonings that were mildly sedative in normal culinary quantities, but could be concentrated into more potent preparations if circumstances demanded. Other spices could mask unusual odors or tastes, allowing for the introduction of substances that might otherwise be detected by suspicious diners. But Elena's most important preparation involved creating hidden storage compartments within her cooking equipment. Kitchen knives were concealed in false bottoms of spice containers, while small vials of concentrated preparations were hidden within innocent-looking bottles of cooking oils and vinegars. Anyone examining her supplies would see only the tools and ingredients necessary for preparing an elaborate feast. Signora Benedetti contributed her own expertise to the mission planning, providing Elena with small glass vials containing various preparations that could serve multiple purposes depending on the situation encountered. Some contained sleeping draughts that could be mixed into wine or soup, while others held substances that would cause temporary illness without permanent harm, useful for creating distractions or disabling guards without triggering immediate retaliation. The night before her departure for the Torino estate, Elena conducted a final inventory of her equipment and supplies. Every knife was sharpened to surgical precision, every vial was clearly labeled with coded markings that indicated contents and dosages, and every piece of equipment was positioned for quick access if situations developed rapidly. As she prepared for sleep, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since her confinement to the kitchen began. The domestic prison her father had created had indeed become an armory, but not in ways that anyone could have anticipated. Tomorrow would determine whether her transformation from sheltered daughter to domestic warrior was complete, or whether additional training would be written in blood and consequences.
The Torino estate rivaled the Rossetti property in size and grandeur, but its architectural style reflected different priorities and regional influences. Where Elena's family home emphasized traditional Sicilian design with thick walls and defensive positioning, the Torino compound showcased more modern elements that prioritized comfort and display over security. This difference would prove crucial to Elena's mission as she navigated their territory with her carefully prepared arsenal of domestic weapons. Elena arrived at the Torino kitchen early Thursday morning, 3 days before the planned celebration, accompanied by 2 junior cooks from her own household, who would serve as both assistants and witnesses to her legitimate business activities. Her supplies filled an entire wagon, wooden crates containing specialty ingredients, copper pots sized for large-scale cooking, and numerous glass containers holding oils, vinegars and spice mixtures that would be essential for the elaborate menu she had promised to deliver. Signora Torino greeted them personally, a gesture of respect that also allowed Elena to study the family matriarch up close. The older woman was elegant and sharp-eyed, with the kind of intelligence that suggested she understood far more about her family's business operations than she typically revealed. More importantly for Elena's purposes, she seemed genuinely appreciative of the catering arrangement and eager to ensure that her guests experienced exceptional hospitality. "You honor our family with your personal attention to this celebration," Signora Torino said as she guided Elena through the kitchen facilities. "Especially during these difficult times when our men seem determined to complicate every aspect of daily life with their territorial disputes." The comment revealed crucial information about the internal dynamics within the Torino household. If the family matriarch disapproved of the current conflict, she might be sympathetic to efforts aimed at resolving the situation peacefully. More tactically relevant, her statement suggested that the women of the household were not fully informed about specific operational details, potentially creating opportunities for Elena to gather intelligence without triggering immediate suspicion. The Torino kitchen was modern and well-equipped, featuring gas ranges alongside traditional wood-fired ovens, electric refrigeration units, and extensive storage areas that would provide numerous opportunities for concealing materials or conducting covert activities. The staff consisted of 5 regular cooks plus temporary workers hired specifically for the celebration, creating a busy environment where Elena's movements would be difficult to monitor continuously. Elena began her intelligence gathering immediately, using the legitimate process of menu planning and ingredient inventory to explore the estate's layout and security arrangements. Each trip to the storage cellars provided opportunities to observe guard positions and patrol patterns, while discussions about serving arrangements revealed details about guest accommodations and the physical geography of entertainment areas. The most significant discovery came when Elena learned that Alessandro was being held in the estate's converted stable building, which had been transformed into guest quarters for visiting associates. This information emerged during casual conversation with the head cook, who mentioned that special meals were being prepared for important visitors, staying in the stable quarters. The location was perfect for Elena's purposes, close enough to the main kitchen for convenient access, but isolated enough that any disturbance would be contained before spreading to other areas. Elena's operational plan crystallized around the preparation schedule for the celebration feast. On Friday evening, she would need to begin overnight preparation of several complex dishes that required extended cooking times. This would provide legitimate reasons for remaining in the kitchen area after normal working hours, when security would be lighter and her movements less conspicuous. The rescue attempt itself would occur Saturday morning, approximately 6 hours before the celebration was scheduled to begin. Elena would prepare a special breakfast for the guards watching Alessandro, incorporating concentrated sleeping draughts that would incapacitate them without causing permanent harm. Once the guards were neutralized, she would have approximately 2 hours to locate and extract her brother before the effects wore off, and their absence was discovered. But Elena's planning went beyond simple rescue operations. The celebration itself represented an opportunity to gather intelligence about Torino family operations, disrupt their organizational capabilities, and potentially end the territorial conflict through strategic rather than violent means. The extensive menu she had planned would allow her to control exactly what every important guest consumed, providing leverage that extended far beyond immediate tactical concerns. Her first direct action came Friday afternoon, when she identified the guard rotation schedule for the stable quarters. Using her access to the kitchen's herb garden, Elena harvested specific plants that had been growing wild along the estate's boundaries. These particular specimens contained alkaloids that, when properly prepared, would create a distinctive bitter taste that could be masked by strong flavors, like those found in traditional Sicilian desserts. The preparation of her special ingredients required precise timing and temperature control, skills that her domestic training had developed to professional levels. Elena worked late into Friday evening, ostensibly preparing complex sauces and pastries for the next day's celebration, but actually creating concentrated extracts that would serve multiple purposes depending on how situations developed. The most delicate aspect of her preparation involved creating antidotes for the various substances she planned to use. Elena had learned from her ancestors' journals that effective domestic warfare required not just the ability to cause problems, but also the capability to solve them quickly when circumstances changed. Each vial of sleeping draught was paired with a stimulant that could reverse its effects, while every toxic preparation had a corresponding neutralizing agent. By midnight Friday, Elena had completed her operational preparations while maintaining the appearance of normal catering activities. Her assistants had retired to their assigned quarters, leaving her alone in the kitchen with direct access to all the materials and equipment she would need for the next day's mission. More importantly, her legitimate presence in the area was now established and expected, providing perfect cover for activities that would be impossible to explain under normal circumstances. As she conducted a final inventory of her hidden weapons and preparations, Elena reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by circumstances beyond her control. 6 months earlier, she had been a sheltered young woman whose greatest concern was avoiding her father's disapproval. Now she was preparing to infiltrate an enemy's stronghold, neutralize armed guards, and rescue her kidnapped brother using tools and techniques that no formal education could have provided. The domestic prison had indeed become an armory, but tomorrow would determine whether it was sufficient for the wars that men created and women were left to resolve. Saturday morning dawned with the kind of crystalline clarity that Sicilian summers provided just before the heat became unbearable. Elena began her day at 4 a.m., using the pre-dawn darkness to complete final preparations while the Torino household still slept. The celebration would begin at sunset, providing her with exactly 14 hours to execute the most complex operation of her life, while maintaining the appearance of routine catering activities. The breakfast preparation for Alessandro's guards represented her first real test of operational timing and precision. Elena had identified 3 men who worked in rotating shifts, ensuring that at least one person remained alert and positioned near the stable quarters at all times. Her strategy required neutralizing all 3 simultaneously, which meant coordinating their meal service, so that each guard consumed the sleeping draught within a narrow time window. The delivery mechanism was a traditional Sicilian breakfast pastry called sfogliatelle, filled with sweetened ricotta cheese that could easily mask the bitter taste of her prepared extracts. Elena had chosen this particular pastry because its complex preparation required legitimate early morning work, and its rich flavors would overwhelm any unusual tastes from her additives. More tactically important, sfogliatelle were traditionally served with strong espresso coffee, providing a second delivery system for her preparations. Elena's technique for incorporating the sleeping draught demonstrated the surgical precision that months of practice had developed. Each pastry required exactly 3 drops of her concentrated extract, mixed thoroughly into the ricotta filling while still warm enough to dissolve completely. The coffee preparation was even more delicate, requiring specific timing to ensure that the active compounds remained stable until consumption. At precisely 6 a.m., Elena dispatched her assistant cooks to deliver the special breakfast to the stable quarters, along with fresh coffee and a selection of seasonal fruits that would encourage the guards to consume the entire meal. The timing was crucial. The sleeping draught would begin taking effect within 30 minutes of consumption, providing Elena with a window for action before the guard's absence would be noticed. While waiting for the preparations to take effect, Elena conducted final reconnaissance of the stable building using the legitimate excuse of checking on the special meal service. Her observation confirmed that Alessandro was being held in the converted tack room at the building's eastern end, secured with a simple lock that could be defeated using kitchen tools she had concealed in her cooking supplies. The rescue itself proceeded with clockwork precision. By 6:30 a.m., all 3 guards were unconscious but breathing normally, positioned in ways that suggested they had simply dozed off during the early morning watch. Elena used a sharpened carving knife to defeat the lock mechanism, freeing Alessandro after 3 days of captivity that had left him weak but uninjured. Alessandro's condition required immediate attention, but Elena's domestic training had prepared her for this possibility as well. She had brought concentrated meat broth and glucose preparations that would restore his strength quickly, along with stimulants that would help him remain alert during their escape. More importantly, she had prepared detailed instructions for reaching a predetermined rendezvous point where loyal Rossetti associates would be waiting to provide transportation back to their family estate. But Elena's mission extended beyond simple rescue operations. The celebration scheduled for later that evening represented an unprecedented opportunity to gather intelligence about Torino family operations and potentially resolve the territorial conflict through strategic rather than violent means. With Alessandro safely evacuated,
Elena returned to the kitchen to begin preparing for the second phase of her operation. The lunch service provided her first opportunity to test broader applications of her domestic warfare techniques. Elena prepared a traditional antipasto selection that included various cured meats, cheeses, and marinated vegetables, each chosen for their ability to mask unusual flavors while delivering precise dosages of different compounds. Her goal was not to harm the Torino family members, but to demonstrate capabilities that would discourage future aggressive actions against her own family. The preparations Elena introduced into the lunch service were designed to create temporary but memorable effects that would send clear messages about her capabilities without causing permanent damage. Some guests would experience mild digestive discomfort that would peak during important evening conversations. Others would find themselves unusually sleepy during crucial business discussions. A few would develop temporary speech difficulties that would make confidential conversations impossible. Most importantly, Elena reserved special preparations for the specific individuals who had been involved in planning Alessandro's kidnapping. Roberto Torino, the family's primary enforcer, received antipasto selections that contained concentrated extracts known for causing intense but temporary headaches. His lieutenant Salvatore consumed cheese preparations that would create nausea severe enough to incapacitate him during the evening's entertainment. The psychological impact of these targeted effects was precisely what Elena had intended. By early afternoon, several Torino associates were experiencing symptoms that defied easy explanation. The randomness and specificity of the problems suggested that someone within their organization possessed capabilities they had never encountered before. More unsettling was the realization that their symptoms had begun immediately after consuming food prepared by the Rossetti catering service. Elena observed these developments while maintaining the appearance of routine food preparation for the evening celebration. Her staff worked efficiently, under her direction, unaware that their cooking activities were simultaneously serving intelligence gathering and psychological warfare functions. The legitimate demands of preparing a feast for 50 guests provided perfect cover for Elena's more covert activities. The afternoon's reconnaissance revealed additional intelligence that would prove valuable for future operations. Elena learned that the Torino family's financial operations were experiencing significant pressure from recent law enforcement activities, making them vulnerable to additional economic disruption. Their territorial expansion had overextended their resources, creating internal disagreements about priorities and strategy that could be exploited by more subtle approaches than direct violence. Most significantly, Elena discovered that several prominent Torino associates were already questioning the wisdom of escalating conflicts with the Rossetti family, particularly given their organization's current vulnerabilities. The kidnapping had been controversial even within their own ranks, with some members arguing that it would provoke retaliation that they were not prepared to handle effectively. This intelligence provided Elena with the foundation for the evening's main operation, which would demonstrate definitively that continued aggression against her family would be both costly and futile. The evening celebration at the Torino estate attracted 53 guests representing the most powerful criminal families across western Sicily, creating an unprecedented opportunity for Elena to demonstrate her capabilities on a scale that would reshape the regional balance of power. Her elaborate menu had been planned not just for culinary excellence but to deliver precise messages about the consequences of underestimating domestic warfare techniques. Elena had spent the afternoon preparing her most sophisticated operation yet, using the legitimate demands of feast preparation to create a complex web of cause and effect that would unfold throughout the evening. Each course was designed to produce specific results among carefully targeted individuals, while providing plausible explanations for any unusual symptoms that might develop. The antipasto course set the tone for everything that followed. Elena had prepared 7 different selections, each containing subtly different additives that would affect specific guests according to her strategic objectives. The olive tapenade contained preparations that would enhance alcohol absorption, ensuring that certain individuals became intoxicated more quickly than usual. The cured meats included compounds that would create mild paranoia and suspicion, particularly effective when combined with the natural tensions that existed among rival families. Most elegantly, Elena had prepared special wine selections that would interact with the various food additives to create amplified effects throughout the evening. Guests who consumed both the targeted appetizers and the corresponding wines would experience symptoms ranging from sleepiness to confusion to temporary memory problems, all timed to occur during the most important conversations and negotiations of the night. The psychological impact began during the second course when several prominent associates started displaying behaviors that disrupted normal social dynamics. Giuseppe Torino, who served as the family's primary negotiator, found himself unable to concentrate during discussions about territorial agreements. His counterpart from the Messina family became uncharacteristically argumentative, creating friction that had been absent when the evening began. Elena observed these developments from her position in the kitchen, monitoring the results of her preparations while maintaining the appearance of routine food service management. Her staff remained unaware of the strategic dimensions of their work, focused exclusively on delivering exceptional hospitality that would enhance the Rossetti family's reputation regardless of the evening's other outcomes. The main course represented Elena's masterpiece of domestic warfare technique. She had prepared osso buco, using traditional methods that required hours of slow cooking, but her preparation included botanicals that would create a delayed reaction syndrome affecting cognitive function and emotional regulation. Guests who consumed the dish would gradually become less capable of rational decision-making while simultaneously becoming more susceptible to suggestion and manipulation. The timing was crucial to Elena's broader strategy. The osso buco's effects would begin manifesting approximately 2 hours after consumption, coinciding perfectly with the evening's most important business discussions. By that point, key decision-makers from multiple families would be operating under chemical influences that made them more likely to agree to proposals they would normally reject. Elena's ultimate target was Don Torino himself, the family patriarch whose authorization would be required for any permanent resolution of the territorial conflict. She had prepared a portion of the main course with additional compounds that would create a specific combination of effects: reduced aggression, enhanced empathy, and temporarily impaired risk assessment capabilities. These changes would make him more receptive to negotiated solutions while reducing his likelihood of choosing violent retaliation. The strategy proved remarkably effective. By 9 p.m., Don Torino was displaying uncharacteristic interest in discussing peaceful resolution of recent conflicts, while several of his key advisors were too impaired to provide their usual counsel toward aggressive response. The combination created an unexpected opportunity for productive negotiations that might otherwise have been impossible. But Elena's preparations extended beyond psychological manipulation of individual targets. She had also created contingency plans for various scenarios that might develop during the evening, including emergency antidotes for her own preparations and rapid-acting compounds that could incapacitate threats if negotiations failed to produce satisfactory results. The dessert course provided her platform for the evening's final demonstration. Elena had prepared a avocado filled with ricotta preparations that contained her most potent compounds, but only specific individuals received the enhanced versions. These targeted desserts would create lasting memories of the evening's events, ensuring that the psychological impact of her demonstration would persist long after the immediate effects had subsided. Most importantly, Elena used the dessert service to deliver her ultimate message. Each plate was garnished with specific flower arrangements that carried traditional Sicilian meanings, some symbolizing peace and reconciliation, others warning of consequences for continued aggression. The combination created a clear communication that transcended language barriers and cultural differences. The evening concluded with spontaneous agreements between families that had been feuding for months, handshake deals that resolved territorial disputes without violence, and commitments to peaceful coexistence that would have seemed impossible when the celebration began. Don Torino personally approached Elena during the final cleanup, expressing gratitude for her exceptional hospitality and suggesting that future cooperation between their families might benefit everyone involved. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the recognition among all attendees that domestic capabilities could be as strategically important as traditional military approaches. Elena had demonstrated that a young woman confined to kitchen duties could wield influence that rivaled or exceeded that of armed enforcers and traditional authority figures. As Elena prepared to return to her family estate, she reflected on how completely the evening had validated her transformation from domestic prisoner to strategic operative. The kitchen had indeed become her armory, and she had proven that weapons forged from culinary knowledge could be more devastating than bullets or blades when properly applied. The territorial conflict that had threatened to consume both families was resolved without a single shot being fired, accomplished through techniques that no traditional military strategist would have considered possible.
Elena's triumphant return to the Rossetti estate was complicated by discoveries that would transform her domestic warfare victory into the opening move of a much larger and more dangerous game. Alessandro's rescue and the successful resolution of the Torino conflict had indeed demonstrated her capabilities, but they had also attracted attention from forces that operated on scales far beyond family territorial disputes. Don Marco's reaction to his daughter's unauthorized operation was a complex mixture of pride, anger, and strategic calculation that reflected his growing understanding of Elena's true capabilities. The successful rescue of Alessandro had undoubtedly saved the family from costly and dangerous retaliation efforts, while the peaceful resolution with the Torinos had preserved valuable business relationships that violent solutions would have destroyed permanently. But Elena's methods had also revealed knowledge and skills that raised uncomfortable questions about the security of his own organization. If his teenage daughter could infiltrate enemy territory, neutralize guards, and manipulate prominent criminal leaders using domestic techniques, what did that suggest about the vulnerability of his own operations to similar attacks? "You have exceeded every expectation I held for your capabilities," Don Marco admitted during a private conversation in his study 3 days after the celebration. "But you have also demonstrated that confinement to domestic duties has not prevented you from developing unconventional expertise that extends far beyond what any woman in our family has previously possessed." The conversation revealed Elena's father's internal conflict between traditional expectations about women's roles and practical recognition of her strategic value to family operations. Don Marco understood that Elena's unique combination of domestic access and tactical intelligence made her potentially more valuable than any of his traditional associates, but accepting that reality would require abandoning beliefs that had shaped his worldview for decades. More immediately problematic was the attention that Elena's success had attracted from other criminal organizations throughout Sicily and beyond. Word of the barefoot teenager's domestic warfare techniques had spread quickly through networks that connected families across the Mediterranean, creating both opportunities and threats that neither Elena nor her father had anticipated. The first indication of these broader implications came when Signora Benedetti reported unusual activity around the estate's perimeter. Strangers had been observed watching the kitchen windows during meal preparation times, while local merchants mentioned questions from unfamiliar customers about the Rossetti family's domestic staff and household routines. The intelligence gathering was sophisticated enough to suggest professional interest rather than casual curiosity. Elena's analysis of these developments led to a disturbing conclusion. Her demonstration at the Torino celebration had established her as both an asset and a threat to organizations that operated beyond traditional family boundaries. Groups involved in international smuggling, political corruption, and financial crimes understood that someone capable of influencing prominent decision-makers through undetectable means could either serve their interests or threaten their security. The first direct approach came from representatives of the Marseille Syndicate, a French criminal organization with extensive operations throughout the Mediterranean region. Their emissary, a sophisticated woman named Claudette Moreau, arrived at the estate under the pretext of discussing potential catering services for high-level business meetings in France and North Africa. Moreau's actual intentions became clear during a private conversation with Elena in the estate's herb garden, away from the surveillance capabilities that both women assumed were monitoring their movements. The French organization had learned details about the Torino operation that suggested they possessed intelligence sources within multiple Sicilian families, and they were prepared to offer Elena opportunities that extended far beyond regional criminal activities. "Your techniques represent a revolutionary approach to influence and control," Moreau explained while examining Elena's poisonous plant collections with obvious expertise. Organizations throughout Europe and North Africa face similar challenges with rivals, authorities, and business partners who resist conventional persuasion methods. A specialist with your capabilities could command extraordinary compensation while accessing resources that no traditional criminal career could provide. But Elena recognized that Moreau's offer represented a fundamental choice between local loyalty and international opportunities that would permanently separate her from everything she had known. Accepting foreign employment would provide financial independence and professional development, but it would also make her a target for every organization that viewed her capabilities as threatening to their security. More immediately concerning was Moreau's obvious knowledge about Elena's specific techniques and preparations. Someone within her trusted circle had been providing detailed intelligence to foreign organizations, suggesting that her operational security had been compromised from the beginning. The domestic armory that had seemed so secure was apparently vulnerable to infiltration by forces she had never considered. Elena's investigation of this security breach led to painful discoveries about loyalty and trust within her own household. Signora Benedetti, who had served as mentor and protector throughout Elena's transformation, had been reporting her progress to a network of contacts that extended throughout the Mediterranean criminal world. The older woman's motivations were complex, partly protective, partly ambitious, and partly shaped by commitments that predated her employment with the Rossetti family. "I have been preparing you for opportunities that extend far beyond this estate," Benedetti admitted when confronted with evidence of her communications. "Your capabilities are too valuable to waste on local family disputes, and the world offers possibilities that you cannot imagine from within these walls. But those possibilities come with obligations to people who have invested significantly in your development." The revelation forced Elena to confront the reality that her domestic warfare education had been influenced by an agenda that extended far beyond family protection or personal empowerment. She had been developed as an asset for organizations that viewed her capabilities as strategic resources rather than individual achievements, and her choices were now constrained by expectations and commitments she had never consciously accepted. The immediate consequence was a heightened state of alert throughout the Rossetti estate, as Don Marco implemented security measures designed to protect his daughter from recruitment efforts while preventing her techniques from being duplicated by rival organizations. Elena found herself once again confined to domestic areas, but now the confinement was motivated by protective rather than restrictive purposes. But Elena understood that external pressures would continue escalating regardless of her family's security measures. Her demonstration of domestic warfare capabilities had created a situation where neutrality was no longer possible. She would either accept opportunities with international organizations or become a target for elimination by groups that viewed her knowledge as too dangerous to remain independent. The arrival of additional foreign representatives at the Rossetti estate confirmed Elena's assessment that her domestic warfare demonstration had attracted attention from criminal organizations across multiple continents. Within 2 weeks of Claudette Moreau's visit, the estate received approaches from representatives of syndicates based in Naples, Constantinople, and even New York, each offering variations of employment that would remove Elena from Sicily while placing her capabilities in service of international operations. Don Marco's response to these recruitment efforts revealed the sophisticated intelligence networks that connected seemingly independent criminal families across vast geographical distances. His investigation of the various organizations revealed that Elena's reputation had spread through established channels that facilitated information sharing about valuable assets, emerging threats, and tactical innovations that might affect operations throughout the Mediterranean region and beyond. More disturbing was the discovery that Elena's techniques were already being studied and potentially replicated by specialists in other locations. Intelligence reports suggested that criminal organizations in Marseille and Naples had begun recruiting women with culinary backgrounds for training in unconventional warfare methods, while groups in North Africa were experimenting with traditional poisoning techniques that bore suspicious similarities to Elena's botanical preparations. Elena realized that her innovations had inadvertently triggered an arms race in domestic warfare capabilities as rival organizations sought to develop their own specialists who could match or counter her techniques.
The knowledge she had developed through years of careful study and experimentation was being weaponized by groups that lacked her ethical constraints and protective motivations. The situation became more complex when Elena discovered that her own government was monitoring these developments with considerable interest. Italian intelligence services had been tracking the international recruitment efforts and had concluded that Elena's capabilities represented a potential national security asset that should not be allowed to fall under foreign control. This realization emerged through a carefully orchestrated meeting with Colonel Giuseppe Real, an Italian intelligence officer who approached Elena through intermediaries who had been observing her activities for months. Real's organization understood that traditional military and police methods were often inadequate for penetrating criminal networks that operated across national boundaries, and they were prepared to offer Elena opportunities for patriotic service that would protect her from foreign recruitment while advancing legitimate government interests. "Your country has invested in your education and development," Real explained during a private meeting disguised as a social visit to the estate. "It would be unfortunate if those investments were to benefit organizations that operate against Italian interests throughout the Mediterranean region. We can provide protection, resources, and opportunities for service that align with your personal values while ensuring that your capabilities serve legitimate purposes." But Elena recognized that government service would simply replace one form of confinement with another, potential, more restrictive set of obligations. Intelligence organizations were notorious for their reluctance to release valuable assets, and accepting their protection would likely mean permanent separation from her family and homeland while serving objectives that she might not support or understand. The complexity of these competing interests was further complicated by Elena's discovery that several international organizations were prepared to use violent methods to prevent her recruitment by their rivals. Intelligence reports suggested that assassination attempts were being planned by groups that preferred to eliminate her capabilities rather than risk their deployment against their own operations. Elena's response to these escalating pressures demonstrated the strategic thinking that her domestic warfare education had developed beyond simple tactical applications. Rather than choosing among the various options being presented to her, she began developing a fourth alternative that would allow her to maintain independence while managing the threats that her capabilities had created. Her strategy centered on creating a carefully controlled demonstration that would satisfy the curiosity of all interested parties while establishing clear boundaries around her future availability for various types of service. Elena proposed organizing a gathering that would bring together representatives from multiple organizations, allowing each group to observe her capabilities while negotiating agreements that would prevent future recruitment efforts or elimination attempts. The logistics of such a gathering required delicate diplomacy and extensive security arrangements that tested the limits of her family's resources and influence. Don Marco initially opposed the plan as unnecessarily dangerous, but Elena convinced him that controlled demonstration was preferable to ongoing uncertainty and escalating threats from multiple directions. Signora Benedetti played a crucial role in organizing the event, using her connections throughout the Mediterranean criminal world to facilitate communications between normally antagonistic organizations. Her network of contacts proved invaluable for establishing neutral ground and negotiating temporary truces that would allow representatives to attend without triggering immediate conflicts. The chosen venue was a luxury hotel on the Italian mainland, selected for its combination of elegance, security, and accessibility for international visitors. Elena would prepare a demonstration feast that showcased her capabilities while delivering specific messages to each attending organization about the consequences of continued recruitment efforts or hostile actions. But Elena's ultimate objective extended beyond simply resolving her immediate situation. She intended to use the gathering to establish herself as an independent operator who could provide specialized services to legitimate clients while maintaining strict ethical standards and personal autonomy. The domestic warfare techniques that had begun as tools for family protection would be transformed into a professional practice that served broader humanitarian purposes. The challenge would be convincing organizations accustomed to controlling their assets that Elena's independence was more valuable than her servitude, and that attempting to force her cooperation would prove more costly than accepting her terms for voluntary collaboration. As Elena began preparing for what would become known throughout criminal circles as the Feast of Agreements, she understood that she was attempting something unprecedented, using domestic warfare techniques to negotiate peace treaties between international criminal organizations while establishing her own position as a neutral specialist whose capabilities serve justice rather than criminal enterprise. The success or failure of this demonstration would determine whether Elena's transformation from domestic prisoner to strategic operative would culminate in genuine independence or permanent entanglement in conflicts that extended far beyond anything she had initially imagined. The luxury Hotel Palazzo da Mare is situated on the dramatic coastline where Sicily's ancient Greek temples overlooked the Mediterranean, provided an appropriately elegant setting for what intelligence circles would later describe as the most unusual diplomatic gathering in modern criminal history. Elena had chosen the venue specifically for its symbolic significance, a place where different civilizations had historically met to negotiate agreements that shaped the ancient world. Representatives from 7 major criminal organizations arrived during the final week of August, each delegation bringing their own security teams, communication specialists, and various experts who would evaluate Elena's demonstration from different professional perspectives. The guest list read like a directory of Mediterranean criminal leadership, Marseille syndicate executives, Neapolitan crime family lieutenants, North African smuggling network coordinators, and even representatives from American organizations with extensive European operations. Colonel Real attended as an unofficial observer, ostensibly representing potential government interest in Elena's capabilities while actually coordinating with hotel security to ensure that the gathering didn't escalate into open warfare between rival organizations. His presence provided an additional layer of complexity to negotiations that were already operating on multiple levels of diplomatic subtlety. Elena spent 3 days preparing for the feast, using the hotel's professional kitchens to create her most sophisticated demonstration yet. Each course was designed to deliver specific messages about capability, restraint, and consequences while showcasing techniques that could be adapted for various operational requirements depending on client needs and ethical constraints. The opening reception established the evening's parameters through carefully orchestrated displays of Elena's intelligence gathering and psychological manipulation capabilities. Cocktails were prepared with additives that enhanced social interaction while reducing inhibition, creating an atmosphere conducive to productive negotiations between normally antagonistic parties. Each delegate received precisely calibrated preparations designed to optimize their receptivity to Elena's proposals while maintaining their ability to make rational decisions about future cooperation. But Elena's most impressive demonstration involved her use of traditional Sicilian hospitality customs to establish psychological dominance over experienced criminal leaders who were accustomed to controlling every aspect of their professional inner. By positioning herself as the gracious hostess rather than a potential asset to be acquired, Elena forced each delegation to compete for her attention and approval rather than simply asserting their organizational authority. The formal dinner provided Elena's platform for demonstrating the full range of her domestic warfare capabilities. Each course showcased different techniques, and a pastel selections displayed her botanical knowledge and preparation precision. The pasta course demonstrated her ability to create time-delayed effects that could influence decision-making hours after consumption. And the meat course showed how traditional recipes could be modified to produce specific psychological and physiological responses. Most importantly, Elena used the dinner service to deliver personalized messages to each delegation leader. Claudette Moreau received preparations that enhanced memory formation, ensuring that she would retain detailed recollections of Elena's capabilities while experiencing mild euphoria that would associate positive emotions with potential future cooperation. The Neapolitan representative consumed dishes that created heightened alertness combined with reduced aggression, making him more receptive to negotiated solutions. Colonel Real's meal contained compounds that would enhance his ability to recognize deception while reducing his susceptibility to emotional manipulation effectively, providing him with chemical assistance for evaluating the various proposals and promises being made throughout the evening. Elena understood that government support might prove crucial for maintaining her independence from criminal organizations, and she wanted to ensure that official assessments of her capabilities were as accurate as possible. The most delicate aspect of her demonstration involved convincing each organization that her independence was more valuable than her servitude. Elena accomplished this by showcasing techniques that could be used either defensively or offensively, depending on the moral character of the application. The Gates who consumed her specially prepared desserts experienced temporary cognitive enhancement that allowed them to understand complex strategic implications more clearly, helping them recognize that forcing Elena's cooperation would ultimately prove counterproductive. The evening's climax came during Elena's formal presentation delivered while her various preparations were beginning to take effect among the assembled delegates. Speaking in multiple languages to accommodate her diverse audience, Elena outlined her terms for future cooperation. She would provide consulting services to legitimate clients facing security challenges, but only for operations that met strict ethical standards and served broader humanitarian purposes. I have demonstrated that domestic warfare techniques can resolve conflicts that traditional methods cannot address effectively, Elena explained while presenting examples of her botanical preparations and tactical applications. But these capabilities serve justice and protection, not criminal enterprise or organizational ambition. Clients who understand this distinction will find me a valuable ally. Those who do not will discover that might work equally well against targets who threaten innocent people. The negotiations that followed lasted until dawn as each delegation sought to secure Elena's services while accepting limitations that their organizations had never previously encountered. Some groups withdrew their recruitment offers entirely, recognizing that Elena's ethical constraints would make her unsuitable for their typical operations. Others began discussing legitimate business ventures that could benefit from her consultation while operating within her moral boundaries. Most significantly, Colonel Real negotiated an arrangement that would provide Elena with official government protection in exchange for her assistance with investigations involving international criminal networks. This relationship would allow her to maintain her independence while contributing to law enforcement efforts that align with her personal values and protective motivations. The formal agreement signed that morning established Elena as the first independent domestic warfare specialist in modern history, with clearly defined terms for engagement that protected both her autonomy and her clients' legitimate interests. Criminal organizations agreed to cease recruitment efforts in exchange for potential access to her, while government agencies committed to respecting her independence while providing security assistance when requested. But perhaps the most important outcome was the recognition among all parties that Elena's transformation from domestic prisoner to strategic operative represented a new category of professional expertise that transcended traditional boundaries between criminal and legitimate activities. Her capabilities could serve any organization that prioritized problem-solving over violence, protection over exploitation, and ethical solutions over expedient ones. As delegates began departing the hotel, each carrying carefully prepared gift baskets that contained subtle reminders of Elena's capabilities, she reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by circumstances that had initially seemed like imprisonment and limitation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.